Tell the waitress she's too clumsy to deserve a tip." The billionaire didn't say it in English. He smiled politely across the elegant restaurant table and spoke in flawless Italian, convinced that no one around him would understand a single word. His business partners chuckled quietly, already anticipating the waitress's humiliation. The young waitress calmly finished pouring the wine. Then she looked directly at him, her expression steady and respectful. In perfect Italian, she replied, "My father always taught me that wealth can buy a fine meal, sir, but it can never buy good manners." The laughter vanished. A wine glass slipped from one guest's hand and shattered on the marble floor. Every conversation in the restaurant came to an abrupt stop as stunned faces turned toward the waitress. Even the billionaire's confident smile disappeared. For the first time that evening, he had nothing to say. But what happened over the next hour would reveal why the waitress spoke flawless Italian, and uncover a secret that would change both of their lives forever. Before we discover the truth, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Corner Stories, and share it with someone who believes kindness is always stronger than pride. And let us know in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? The silence inside the restaurant became almost unbearable. Every server had stopped moving. The pianist's hands hovered above the keys. Even the chef peeked through the kitchen window, sensing that something extraordinary had just happened. The billionaire, Alexander Bennett, slowly placed his glass on the table. "You speak Italian?" he asked, this time in English. The waitress nodded politely. "Yes, sir." One of Alexander's business partners laughed awkwardly. Well, I guess that joke didn't land, but no one else was smiling. The young waitress wasn't angry. She hadn't raised her voice or embarrassed him. Her calm reply somehow made the moment even more uncomfortable. Alexander looked at her name tag. Sophia. He studied her face for a moment, surprised by her confidence. "Where did you learn Italian?" Sophia hesitated. "My father was born in Florence." "And you're working here as a waitress?" She smiled faintly. "There's nothing wrong with honest work." Her answer drew approving glances from nearby diners. Before Alexander could respond, the restaurant manager hurried over, clearly nervous. "Sophia," he whispered, "please apologize to Mr. Bennett." She looked confused. "For what?" The manager lowered his voice. "He's one of our biggest investors." Sophia straightened her shoulders. "I'll apologize if I made a mistake while serving his table." She paused. "But I won't. Apologize for answering him truthfully." The room fell silent again. Instead of looking offended, Alexander seemed unexpectedly curious. He had spent years surrounded by people who agreed with everything he said. No one had challenged him so calmly or so honestly. Just then, one of his executives leaned toward him. "We're getting late for the merger discussion." Alexander barely acknowledged him. Instead, he asked Sophia another question. "Your father, does he still live in Italy?" Her smile faded. "He passed away 6 years ago." "I'm sorry." "He was a language professor," she continued quietly. "He believed that learning another person's language meant learning to respect their humanity." Those words lingered in the air. Alexander looked down at the expensive menu in front of him. Suddenly unable to enjoy the meal he had ordered, for reasons he couldn't explain, Sophia's quiet dignity reminded him of someone he hadn't thought about in years. Before he could ask another question, a commotion erupted near the restaurant entrance. A frantic elderly man rushed inside, holding a worn leather briefcase. "Miss Sophia," he shouted. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Sophia's face turned pale. Inside that old briefcase was something she had hoped no one from her past would ever bring into this restaurant. Especially not tonight with Alexander Bennett watching every move she made. The elderly man stopped beside Sophia, breathing heavily from the rush. "I'm so sorry," he said, clutching the worn briefcase. "I know you asked me to keep this safe, but after what happened this morning, I couldn't wait any longer." Sophia glanced nervously toward Alexander. "Mr. Romano," she whispered, "this isn't the right time." "It has to be." He carefully placed the old leather briefcase on a nearby table. Its faded corners and cracked handle suggested it had been carried for decades. Alexander watched silently. "What is it?" he asked. Sophia looked down. "My father's." Mr. Romano slowly opened the case. Inside were neatly organized notebooks, university certificates, old photographs, and dozens of handwritten letters tied together with a blue ribbon. One photograph immediately caught Alexander's attention. He leaned closer. The picture showed a much younger Sophia standing beside an older man, and next to them was someone Alexander recognized instantly, his own father. Alexander frowned. "How do you have a photograph with my father?" Sophia looked just as surprised. "You knew him?" Before either of them could say another word, Mr. Romano answered. "They weren't just acquaintances." He picked up another photograph. "They were best friends at the University of Florence. Over 30 years ago." The restaurant fell completely silent. Alexander stared at the faded image. His father had rarely spoken about his years in Italy. After returning to America, he buried himself in business, leaving most of those memories behind. Mr. Romano opened one of the notebooks. "Your father and Professor Marco Rossi dreamed of creating an international scholarship together," he explained. "A program that would give poor students the chance to study abroad." Sophia lowered her eyes, but they lost contact. Mr. Romano shook his head. "No, they didn't." He carefully unfolded an old letter that had never been mailed. "It was written by your father." Alexander's heart skipped. "My father?" Mr. Romano nodded. He searched for Marco for years, but the letters kept coming back, because Marco had moved to care for his sick wife. By the time they finally found each other again, your father had already passed away. Alexander slowly accepted the letter with trembling hands. As he read the opening lines, his confident expression disappeared. "Dear Marco, if fate ever brings our families together again, promise me we'll remind our children that kindness is worth more than success." Alexander looked up, speechless. The waitress he had mocked only minutes earlier wasn't just another employee. She was the daughter of the man his own father had once called the finest friend I ever had. And suddenly, Alexander realized that the greatest embarrassment of the evening wasn't Sophia's reply. It was the man he had become. Alexander remained seated, the letter trembling in his hands. Around him, the restaurant was so quiet that the soft melody from the piano seemed to echo through the room. He read the final lines twice before carefully folding the paper. Then he looked at Sophia. "I owe you an apology." She met his eyes but said nothing. Alexander slowly stood up for a man whose name appeared on magazine covers and whose speeches moved stock markets. Admitting he was wrong had never come easily. Yet at that moment his wealth meant nothing. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "Not just for what I said in Italian, but for believing that someone's uniform tells me who they are." No one in the restaurant had expected those words. Sophia offered a small, respectful smile. "My father used to say that the strongest people aren't the ones who never make mistakes," she replied. "They're the ones who have the courage to admit them." Alexander nodded quietly. "I think your father was wiser than most CEOs I've ever met." The tension in the room finally began to ease. Then Mr. Romano opened the briefcase one last time. "There's something else." He removed a sealed envelope addressed to Alexander Bennett. It was written by Professor Rossi shortly before he passed away. "He asked me to deliver it if I ever met you." Alexander carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "If my daughter ever crosses your path, don't give her opportunities because she's my child. Give them only if she earns them. Character should always come before connections." Alexander lowered the letter, deeply moved. He turned to the restaurant manager. "How long has Sophia worked here?" "Nearly 4 years," the manager answered. "She's never missed a shift, often covers for others, and refuses special treatment." Alexander smiled for the first time that evening. That sounds exactly like her father. A week later, Sophia received an invitation to visit the Bennett Foundation, not for a publicity event, but for a conversation. Alexander had revived the forgotten scholarship dream that his father and Professor Rossi had once shared. Together with Sophia, he launched an international education program that helped hardworking students from struggling families study overseas, regardless of their financial background. At the opening ceremony, Alexander surprised everyone by inviting Sophia to speak first. Standing before hundreds of guests, she said only one sentence. "My father taught me languages, but life taught me that the most important one is kindness." The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation, and Alexander knew that the greatest investment he would ever make wasn't in another company. It was in becoming the kind of man his father would have been proud to call his son. Months later, the Bennett-Rossi International Scholarship had already changed dozens of lives. Students who once believed college was only a dream were now studying in countries they had only seen in books. Every graduation ceremony reminded Alexander that true success isn't measured by the size of your fortune, but by the number of lives you help transform. Sophia never forgot the restaurant where everything changed. She continued to treat every customer with the same kindness and respect, proving that dignity comes from character, not a job title. As for Alexander, he never again judged a person by their appearance. Instead, he carried his father's letter in his briefcase as a daily reminder that humility is the greatest mark of leadership. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness can change the world, and subscribe to Kindness Corner Stories for more unforgettable emotional journeys. We'd also love to hear from you, so tell us in the comments which city and country you're watching from. Because the richest heart in the room is never measured by money, it is measured by the respect it shows to others.